ease our audience into the conversation today, can you share with me why CSR is important to Sri Lanka today?
So if I'm to just take a very quick analogy, as a citizen, a normal person has rights and responsibilities in society. Likewise, a corporate or any organization for that matter has certain commitments as much as rights within society in which they operate. So in that context, CSR to me is something very important, very fundamental to being a good corporate citizen. And by good corporate citizen, I'm not just meaning doing the barest minimum, fulfilling the law, because that's a given. You have to fulfill laws and regulations. What is within our skill sets, what is within our capacity, what is within our resources, and how do we play that role? Simply because we feel that that way we can strategize, plan, implement, and monitor CSR in a more focused and sustainable manner. To each organization, their own. For every organization, there will be a comfortable way of doing it, whatever they call it. But ultimately, to me, the core is how we structure our CSR. How do we resource it? How do we facilitate it? How do we support it? It's really critical that the top management down, everyone understands the importance of CSR, not just for the organization, but for the country. And then how do we map it out and do it? So to me, what we do and how we do is more critical than what we call it in terms of terminology.
CSR, ESG, sustainability. It's all about doing better. We spoke about all of this and more with Carmeline Jayasuriya. Stay tuned.
When you have an ambition, trust your instincts, move forward. This is your moment to shape your future, to be independent, to strengthen yourself. Your time is now. Accelerate your progress, empowering your progress for a fulfilled life. Union Assurance.
For 30 years, LMD has been the voice of business in Sri Lanka, capturing the pulse of the nation's corporate landscape through its iconic covers. Each cover tells a story, from the first edition in 1994 to the present day, narrating key moments, leaders and trends that have shaped Sri Lanka's business ecosystem. Over the years, LMD covers have featured thought leaders, business pioneers and game-changing innovations, reflecting the evolution of industries and the economy. As we celebrate 30 years, these covers represent more than just publications. They are a testament to LMD's legacy of excellence in business journalism and its unwavering commitment to being Sri Lanka's leading voice of business. LMD, Sri Lanka's voice of business, a legacy of 30 years.
Hello and welcome to LMDtv. The topic of conversation today is CSR, and I'm here with Carmeline Jayasuriya, the head of CSR and Senior Assistant Vice President, John Keells Group. Welcome to our show, Carmeline.
Thank you, Ruwandi, and lovely to be with you.
We've talked many terms, we've used many terms, CSR, ESG, sustainability, all of these things to talk about leaving the world a better place for future generations. To ease our audience into the conversation today, can you share with me why CSR is important to Sri Lanka today?
Sure, Ruwandi. So as you said, these terms such as sustainability, CSR, ESG are often used interchangeably. Sometimes people take it to mean the same thing, and there are a lot of commonalities. But without going into the technicalities too much, I think what is important is that we look at what is meant by CSR and what organizations can and should do as CSR. For us, CSR means primarily not just doing good, but doing what is necessary. So if I'm to just take a very quick analogy, as a citizen, a normal person has rights and responsibilities in society. Likewise, a corporate or any organization for that matter has certain commitments as much as rights within society in which they operate. So in that context, CSR to me is something very important, very fundamental to being a good corporate citizen. And by good corporate citizen, I'm not just meaning doing the barest minimum, fulfilling the law, because that's a given. You have to fulfill laws and regulations. But doing that extra to make a difference in society. And on your second part of the question about why CSR is important, I would say it is because, on the one hand, uh, if you take Sri Lanka as a developing country, although generally development is expected to be carried out by the government, there will be limitations in terms of resources, skills, yeah, capacities, etc. So how do we as organizations partner the government in doing what is necessary, what is within our capability to do? It's not everything that organizations or corporates can just walk in and do, but what is within our skill sets, what is within our capacity, what is within our resources, and how do we play that role? So if I'm to come to John Keells, which I represent, we consider CSR as part of our overall ESG, Environment Social Governance platform. And within that framework, we've decided to establish a dedicated CSR entity, simply because we feel that that way we can strategize, plan, implement, and monitor CSR in a more focused and sustainable manner. To each organization, their own. For every organization, there will be a comfortable way of doing it, whatever they call it. But ultimately, to me, the core is how we structure our CSR. How do we resource it? How do we facilitate it? How do we support it? It's really critical that the top management down, everyone understands the importance of CSR, not just for the organization, but for the country. And then how do we map it out and do it? So to me, what we do and how we do is more critical than what we call it in terms of terminology.
Carmeline, thank you. That was a good introduction to our conversation today. So we see companies, taking the ownership of different spheres, education, community development, and so many, climate change. What areas do you think that Sri Lanka needs most focus on in terms of CSR efforts today?
Okay, it's very hard, Ruwandi, to pick and choose what is more important because, for instance, if you are to take the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them and all are considered important and most of them are interconnected and the SDGs themselves say so. The what you do under one goal can have outcomes under others. The short answer is everything is important. However, having said that, it's important also to understand from a Sri Lankan perspective what becomes important because resources are limited, time is limited, and in that context, how do we optimize the resources and time and space we have? So in that context, I would say that looking at a particular time of the country is important. It's actually time specific, context specific. So for instance, if you are to take Sri Lankan history, the recent history from, the various disasters that arose from time of conflict, the tsunami, the pandemic, the economic crisis. We have faced a series of disasters. In each of those cases, there were certain development needs that emerged as very critical for the nation to move forward and for the people to be able to manage their day-to-day affairs. So in that context, I think it's important for organizations to look at, in that particular time in history, what is important. And then also balance it with what resources one has, what capacity, what bandwidth, what skill sets, because all of them need to come together. And then also to look at what can create meaningful impact. Because trying to do a little bit bits and pieces here and there may not have a long-term impact or be sustainable. So in that context, if I'm to give you a couple of examples, during the economic crisis, for instance, we realized the need to look beyond what we did as CSR on a regular basis, and to look at the country need at that particular time, where there was difficulty in accessing food. The affordability of food was affected. So how do we support the communities affected? So one of the things we did was to work in empowering farmers in our community around our businesses, to see how they could be supported to use better agricultural practices, to cater to the market requirement, grow food that was necessary, relevant, and that could be quickly dispatched to the community that was in need of access to food. So working with the local farmers, supporting them with technologies that were necessary for them to do the needful, and then connecting them to markets. That was one way. The other one was looking at educational gaps. As you know, the government had to suspend its school meal program during the economic crisis. That meant a lot of children were falling out of the school system, and for them, it became necessary to have a square meal.
Yeah.
And when the school stopped providing it, they stopped attending school. Now, that would have a lot of social implications in the future. So what we felt we needed to do also was, beyond the scholarships that we were giving students, to look at supporting the government school meal program, so that children could be provided the nutrition they needed to go back to school to learn. Then also looking at supporting with digital devices, so that even online education could be supported to children who did not have access to tabs and connectivity. Beyond that, Ruwandi, I would also like to talk a little bit about what we mean by social cohesion. Sometimes it's easy for people to understand the need for good education, water and sanitation, good living conditions, alleviating poverty, etc. All these goals are very self-explanatory. But if you take something like social cohesion, why it is important for Sri Lanka at this point of time is something I would like to mention. On the one hand, we have a lot of social barriers where we find people are inhibited. Society is not inclusive. Certain topics are not discussed openly. And what that does is, you kind of inhibit certain segments of the society where they cannot achieve their full potential. So issues like gender-based violence, child abuse, substance abuse, these are things that kind of draw people back from achieving their full potential. So how do we, as a responsible organization, play a role to support these segments, so that ultimately we are more inclusive, we are more supportive, we address issues of violence, take it at its core, address the root causes, so that we can hopefully mitigate, if not fully eliminate, issues like violence from society. The other element is supporting the creative industries, where we feel a country like Sri Lanka has a lot of talent, lot of artists who are emerging from among youth, from among women. The creatives are there. How do we support them and bring them to the fore? And that is not only in terms of livelihoods, by providing them the relevant platforms where they can, access a bigger market, where they can, from Sri Lankan, go regional, global with their creatives, develop the IP necessary for them to develop a brand for themselves. All of that supports livelihoods. But beyond that, also to give them a platform to express themselves, so that you develop this kind of social dialogue, make people mutually respectful, understanding, appreciate differences, especially coming out of a long-drawn conflict, as Sri Lanka has done, to bring people to have that kind of Sri Lankanness, to create a national identity where we don't think in terms of silos, but we think Sri Lankan. So I think in this context, for Sri Lanka, it is really important to develop a sense of cohesiveness, identity, a mutual understanding, and also the creative industries where we can support livelihoods of artists and take them global.
Kamini, I want to ask you something slightly different. We're seeing that there is much progress that companies have been making in Sri Lanka. I mean, we're seeing that companies are moving away from things like short-term donations, one-off handouts, to more sustainable, long-term CSR initiatives. But of course, there's a lot more to be done. How can this mindset be shared among organizations, regardless of the size and sector that they are in?
Yes, that's a good question, Ruwandi, because I think very often when you talk of CSR, people associate it with welfare, philanthropy, handouts, donations, etc. It used to be the case because CSR also has evolved through the years. And at the beginning, that's how even organizations looked at CSR, including ourselves. It was a lot of philanthropy donations. However, when CSR becomes structured and it becomes more mature, what is required to be done is to look at what one needs to do for nation building. As I mentioned earlier, CSR is primarily about supporting nation building. In doing so, we have to ensure that all our people are empowered to be productive, to be skilled, to be healthy, socially cohesive, self-reliant, to be resilient, and ultimately to have a good quality of life. To do so, um, if you go on the welfare mode, what it does is it kind of builds this sense of dependency that, you know, somebody needs to give me what is my due for me to prosper. Otherwise, I just sit and wait. Now, that kind of mentality is very dangerous when it comes to a nation prospering and moving forward. So, right, like you rightly said, a lot of organizations are now moving out of that mode and looking at developing a more kind of empowerment culture. And that is very, very important. And for us, as John Keells Foundation, uh, our vision is empowering the nation for tomorrow. So empowerment is very much the core of our CSR, and it underlines everything we do. And that's the case for all organizations. Now, to the second part of your question, how do we push this to organizations, be they large or small, or whatever sector they represent? Again, it's a constant dialogue. It's very, very important that when people come together on a single project or a similar project, that you discuss and deliberate how you set about doing it. Even in case of disasters that I mentioned earlier, now disasters are a situation where people will naturally have to uh, engage in immediate and short-term relief activities. But even there, how can you look at structuring it in a manner that is more sustainable? A quick example. Now, let's say in a situation of drought, people are in need of access to clean drinking water. One way of doing it would be to go around distributing water bottles, right? On the one hand, there's a lot of cost. On the other hand, there's the plastic, of course. Another way of doing it in a more sustainable manner would be well cleaning. Can we support cleaning of wells so that people have access to clean potable water?
Yeah.
Can we look at supporting schools or other community centers to have water bodies, water facilities where they can access the need for potable water, but in a manner that is not costly and that is not kind of short term, right? So that is one example. The other is when you talk to organizations, we can come to a consensus. So this is something I do all the time in the context of my work when I meet, whether it's the local government, central government, NGOs, INGOs, UN organizations, grassroots organizations. This topic of empowering people, where we are developing people to be self-sufficient, self-reliant by giving them the right skills, the knowledge, the relevant infrastructure, the ecosystems that are supportive, so that they could progress themselves. They could stand on their own 2 feet without having this culture of entitlement and dependency. Another way I do this personally is when it comes to talking to, say, university students. Sometimes they come for interviews. Sometimes they come looking for internships. Talking to them, I understand that they are involved in various student bodies, various social service organizations. I ask them the question, what do you do and how do you do it? Very often then comes the this response that we go and hand out, school stationery, books to deserving students. We go and provide water bottles to people in need. Then I engage them in conversation to bring this aspect of empowerment. Is there a better way of doing it? You're serving a need, agreed, right? That need needs to be serviced, but is there a better, more empowerment, more empowering, more sustainable way of doing it? So by having this constant dialogue, I think you gradually create that mindset.
Change.
And it's a gradual process, but very, very necessary.
It's time now to take a very short break, but we'll soon be back to talk more about CSR.
Display your brand message on digital screens at prime locations. The largest digital advertising network in Sri Lanka. Emerging Media.
Welcome back to the show. We're in conversation with Carmeline Jayasuriya, the head of CSR and Senior Assistant Vice President, John Keells Group. Carmeline, I want to ask you something slightly different, especially given Sri Lanka's context right now. To be a company, regardless of size or sector, operating in a country that is economically challenged, this makes things difficult. And to be a company doing CSR, taking long-term initiatives, makes it a cost burden as well. How can companies balance this to make it practically manageable?
Yes, it's a very timely question. It's something that all organizations, I think, are challenged by, especially in economically difficult, challenging times. There are two ways of looking at it, Ruwandi, as far as I'm concerned. One is if the CSR work that you do is strategic, it is relevant, it is structured well, it is time and cost efficient, and implemented and monitored properly, I believe it's ultimately a social investment.
Yes.
And like any investment, there's a return. So for instance, if you are to look at, let's say, any organization in Sri Lanka or anywhere else, we constantly require a set of skilled people.
Yes.
People with the right skill sets, the right attitudes, the right kind of motivation to come and join us. Now, if some of our CSR programs, let's say educational programs, involve developing this kind of skill sets, whether it is English or IT or soft skills or career guidance, vocational skills, whatever it be, you are actually directly or indirectly creating a pipeline for any organization, right? So that is, there will be a return on investment from that kind of thing. But having said that, all CSR has a cost element, and that needs to be managed. From my experience, there are various ways of managing it. One is primarily looking at a lean administration. It's, I think, very important when it comes to CSR that you do not have a very huge, cumbersome kind of administration that suck most of your resources. And that becomes also very challenging to sustain in economic downturns. Whereas if you have a lean administration with the right set of skills, you can engage very passionate young people. We know that in today's context, young people are very passionate about, the community, about sustainability, about being, integrated, cohesive, inclusive, etc. So engaging the right set of people in your team, even if it's a lean team, can make your work and be sustainable. The second aspect would be to work with volunteers. Any organization will have a set of skills that can be engaged in terms of volunteers. If you are a large organization, you will have access to more hands. But even if you are a small organization, there are ways that you can reach out to volunteers. Nowadays, there are lots of student bodies, there are lots of social service organizations that are waiting to get involved. Partnering with some of these according to your need, according to the skills that you need, according to your geographical location, you can engage with these organizations on a volunteer basis. You may need to meet certain elementary costs of mobilization, but largely they will volunteer into your work. So that's another way of managing costs. A third way, and something that we do very on an ongoing basis, is to grow partnerships. So we operate on a model where partnering with the government, with the NGO and INGO sector, the academia, the UN bodies, grassroots organizations, even community leaders, depending on where we work, sometimes you will have these community leaders who have commanded the respect and trust of the community. Engaging them and getting their support on board has made our work so much easier, because already the trust is there at the ground level, and it's a case of working with that, working on top of it. So partners are very, very critical. And what that does, Ruwandi, is two things primarily. One is it helps bring on board certain sets of skills, be they technical or other skills. It could be even monetary resources, grassroots connects, networks that they have in that particular geographical area. That comes to the table, which will support the work that you wish to undertake. Right? That's one. The other aspect is you avoid duplication, because very often what we see in Sri Lanka, even elsewhere, is that different organizations do the same kind of work in different ways. That way they duplicate funds, they duplicate work. Sometimes you find the same set of beneficiaries are getting aid from different sources. So by working together cohesively, it helps to avoid duplications, streamline operations, and also make things, when you have more hands on deck, more minds thinking, what it does is it enriches your work. Even when it comes to, coming up with solutions, you're more creative, you're more dynamic, you're having more hands on deck when it comes to implementation. And when it comes to monitoring, sometimes we may not, as an organization, have the expertise to monitor impact. But there may be organizations, there may be persons on ground who have those relevant capacities. So altogether, working jointly, collectively on a common cause makes a whole lot of sense. It makes operations cost efficient, time efficient, and avoiding duplication. Ultimately, it helps to kind of make the pie bigger, when it comes to serving the community and the nation as a whole.
Carmeline, we are unfortunately at the end of our conversation, but I want to ask you one more question, and you paved the way to that question really by talking about the need for monitoring. So monitoring the impact of CSR is, I don't think it's easy, but it's crucial. But we're seeing that more and more companies are now adopting data-driven approaches to get this done. What insights can you share on how companies can use these approaches?
Yes, Ruwandi, monitoring impact is very, very critical. And it's something that I think we have a responsibility to do, particularly because we are, as CSR, we are using very valuable resources. How we put them into use and what dividend it creates on ground and anywhere else is very important to be measured. So, having said that, there are various ways in we measure uh, qualitative impact and quantitative. If I start with quantitative, which is easier, um, very often what we do in terms of CSR is see how we can optimize impact by drawing, larger numbers that could benefit from a single program, so that ultimately a bigger, bigger population or demographic benefits from our programs. So that is the quantitative impact. Measuring that in terms of counting the number of heads and ultimately how they move forward in sustaining the impact of these programs is something that we constantly do. When it comes to qualitative impact, particularly for educational awareness programs, we will have things like pre and post test to evaluate their knowledge before and after the educational or awareness program. If it's an educational program, we will also have ongoing assignments as well as end of course tests.
Yes.
There would be performance evaluations depending on their relevance as well. So all of these things are built into our programs and are constantly monitored and reported on. When it comes to, let's say, livelihood programs, entrepreneurship, etc., the easier aspect would be to see how they have progressed in terms of income.
Of course, yes.
Income generation and how it has translated into benefits immediately is again something that is quantitative, something that is measurable. However, the qualitative aspects of this are more challenging to measure. So, for instance, if I take the example of, let's say, a young mother who gets involved in a livelihood program, who engages in entrepreneurship, she builds this additional income for her family. The income is there, but ultimately what it is utilized for needs a little bit more digging.
Yes.
So, for instance, if she uses this additional income to put a child through an educational program, or let's say if she is supporting an elderly parent, she uses this additional income for medical requirements of this parent so that that person has a better quality of life. These things are difficult to constantly monitor and measure. But that is also very important because it shows the cascading impact of our CSR. And I think it should not be ignored.
Yes.
We just need to use the right set of tools and create the knowledge base among our beneficiaries and the people supporting the implementation and monitoring of our programs to measure. We also, according to the need, engage external agencies to measure impact, both quantitative and qualitative, periodically. So, say we have long-term programs that are ongoing, periodically these agencies would be hired to measure impact, which they do independently, and then they report back to us on the quantitative and qualitative measurements. And now that is somewhat of a costly affair, so it needs to be managed.
True.
And finally, I would say getting that impact from the mouth of our beneficiaries. I think that's the best litmus test because it is nothing better than a beneficiary saying, because of your program, I was able to, develop in this manner. It could be skills, it could be knowledge, it could be livelihoods, it could be entrepreneurial access to markets, whatever it be, I was able to develop. And now this is where I am in life. So if I may quickly wind up with an example to showcase this, I will mention the name of this person with the permission of this person. This is a lady called Surekha who was supported in a village called Halmillava, where we had a very extensive set of community programming going on. Now, this particular woman was a war widow, widowed at the age of 34 with 2 young children and 2 parents, elderly parents to look after. With the death of her husband and she herself not having a source of income, she was literally left hopeless. Now, when we started a program through the Women's Society in Halmil level, this woman was coaxed by the community to come.
Okay.
She came and sat in the last row. She followed all the programs. Later, she told us she came because she had nothing else to do. She was hopeless. She just had nowhere to go. She came and sat. But what she did was she listened. She imbibed what she learned. She went home and experimented. So a lot of the programs that we did as, say, mushroom cultivation, dressmaking, fabric painting, rug making, embroidery, all of this she went home, practiced, and she went one step further than a lot of her colleagues in that women's society, where she developed a sense of entrepreneurship, more out of desperation and need at that time. But I really give her, the credit she deserves, because she started developing these products for the local market. Then she went beyond the local market to the next village, to the district level. And it came to a point where she was able to make a very good income for herself and for her children's education. She put through her children through education. We supported them through primary scholarships. Later on, she went on to say she does not need any further help for her children because she can take care of her children and her parents through the income she's generating and give this to a more deserving person. So this is a wonderful example of somebody who has been empowered to help themselves, their families, and beyond their immediate family, the extended family and the community as a whole, where she plays a role as a community leader now, empowering other women who are in a similar situation as she was. So what I can say is there are measures, there are ways of measuring impact, quantitative, qualitative, the short term, medium to long term, but ultimately it's nothing like going back to your beneficiaries and asking the question, where are you now? What are you doing? And seeing it for ourselves that these people are now empowered and they are enriching the communities around them.
We've been in conversation with Carmeline Jayasuriya, the head of CSR and Senior Assistant Vice President, John Keells Group. Thank you very much for an insightful conversation. I loved it.
Thank you, Ruwandi. It was lovely talking to you.
And thank you to all our viewers for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram and X. Thank you for watching and stay safe.